What if the world isn't controlled by governments, armies, or elections, but by an invisible engine buried deep inside the global financial system? An engine that never appears on your newsfeed. An engine that has no face, no flag, no headquarters, yet silently shapes the rise and fall of nations. It determines who becomes rich, who collapses, who leads, and who is quietly replaced. And here's the twist. Every country uses this engine. Every government depends on it. Every crisis strengthens it. But almost nobody has ever heard its real name. Tonight, we break open a story that begins over a century ago, with a handful of men in a locked room, and ends today in a world where global debt is rising 5 times faster than real economic growth. A world where power doesn't follow money, power follows debt. This is the story of the hidden debt engine quietly rewiring the world's financial power. To understand this hidden mechanism, we need to step back, not to Wall Street, not to Washington, not to the modern banking system, but to a time when money still meant something, a time before digital graphs, before bond markets, before monetary policy, when money was simply gold and silver, and nations could only spend what they actually owned. Back then, power was measured in land, armies, and treasure, not spreadsheets. But as the world industrialized, a new problem appeared. The economy began growing faster than money itself. Countries wanted railroads, factories, ships, armies, schools, telegraph lines, but they didn't have the metal to pay for all of it. They needed something elastic, something that could stretch as fast as their ambitions. Enter credit. Harmless at first, convenient, flexible, but quietly, credit did something gold could never do. It created a permanent dependence on those who issued it. And from that moment a power shift began, from governments to the institutions that create and control debt. The world had activated the first gears of the hidden debt engine, long before anyone understood what it would become. The origin of the modern debt engine can be traced to a single moment. 1907. The US economy had collapsed almost overnight. Banks failed, factories closed, people panicked, and in the middle of the chaos, one man stepped in to save the country, J.P. Morgan, the most powerful banker alive. Morgan bailed out the US government with his private money. Think about that. A single banker stabilizing a nation. It terrified lawmakers. It embarrassed the White House. It proved something shocking. The government wasn't in control of the financial system. The financial system was in control of the government. So in 1910, a secret meeting took place on Jekyll Island. A meeting so secret that even the waitstaff didn't know the attendees' identities. Bankers and senators quietly drafted the blueprint for a new institution. Not a government bank, not a private bank, something in between. An institution that would hold ultimate power over money, interest, and credit. 3 years later, in 1913, it became law. The Federal Reserve was born. And with it, the engine. The Fed didn't start as a monster. It started as a stabilizer, a way to prevent panics, manage interest rates, and ensure liquidity. But World War I changed everything. Nations needed money, more money than they could ever tax. So they borrowed, then borrowed more. The debt engine spun faster. During World War II, it spun harder. After the war, instead of slowing down, the engine fused itself into a new system, Bretton Woods. It created 3 key outcomes. 1. The US dollar became the global reserve currency. 2. Most nations pegged their currency to the dollar. 3. America promised to back the dollar with gold. This sounded stable, solid, trustworthy, but it created a hidden leverage point. If the dollar is the global standard, then anyone who prints dollars controls the world. And the only institution allowed to expand or contract the dollar was the Federal Reserve. The engine had become global. By the late 1960s, something was wrong. Countries around the world realized America was printing more dollars than it had gold to back. France famously sent a warship to New York to physically retrieve its gold reserves. Confidence cracked. And in 1971, President Nixon did the unthinkable. He closed the gold window. He ended the gold standard. He broke the final link between money and reality. From that moment forward, money was debt. Debt was money. They became the same thing. And the engine was now fully unleashed. A system where currency only comes into existence when someone borrows it. A system where stopping debt growth means collapsing the economy. A system where governments must borrow to survive. Once money became debt, the engine's influence grew exponentially. 1. Interest rates became the new weapon. Cut rates gives debt surges, gives markets boom. Raise rates gives debt slows, gives markets crash. Every boom you've ever lived through, debt. Every bust, debt tightening. 2. Governments became addicted. Modern nations can no longer run without borrowing. Debt, finances, everything from wars to welfare to infrastructure to pensions. You're not living in a money economy anymore. You're living in a credit economy, where borrowing replaces real productivity. 3. Banks became the real issuers of money. Through fractional reserve banking, private banks create money every time they issue a loan. Not metaphorically, literally. Credit became the bloodstream of the world, and banks became the heart. For markets became dependent on intervention, the debt engine requires constant stimulation. 1987 crash, interest rate cuts, 2000 dot-com bubble, rate cuts, 2008 global financial crisis, massive bailouts, 2020 pandemic collapse, money printing at a scale the world has never seen. The system survives by expanding debt faster than the last crisis tried to destroy it. The engine grows strongest in chaos. Over the decades, politicians and economists tried to fix the engine. They failed. Attempt 1, balanced budgets, impossible. Shutting off debt growth collapses the economy. No country has balanced its books sustainably in decades. Attempt 2, austerity, cut spending/budgets. Raise taxes. Result, economic contraction gives lower revenue, gives more debt. Austerity doesn't fix the engine, it feeds it. Attempt 3, regulation, regulate banks, regulate markets, regulate leverage. Every regulation triggered innovation, loopholes, derivatives, shadow banking. The debt engine simply moved into the shadows, where oversight can't reach. Attempt 4, inflation control. Central banks raised rates to slow inflation, but raising rates also increases debt interest payments. Governments pay more, households pay more, businesses pay more, businesses pay more. Borrowing slows, recession begins. To fix the recession, they cut rates again, and the engine expands even faster. The entire system is a loop, a self-reinforcing cycle with one direction: more debt, always. Today, the engine is bigger than ever, and more dangerous. Let's look at the numbers. Global debt, over $350 trillion. Global GDP, about $105 trillion. Debt is more than 3 times the world's total economic output. Debt is growing 5 times faster than production. 60% of nations are at risk of default. Central banks now inject or withdraw trillions with a keyboard. If debt were oxygen, the world is breathing faster than its lungs can handle. But here's the part nobody talks about. Debt isn't a side effect. Debt is the system. Debt drives the system. Debt is the engine, and every major global event follows the same pattern. Pattern 1, crisis gives money printing, gives asset inflation to 2008, 2020, 2020, 23 banking panic, Europe's energy crisis, China's property collapse, Japan's yield curve control crisis. Each time, debt expands to restore stability, and each time, the engine becomes more essential. Pattern 2, rising debt gives rising power for issuers. Countries that issue global reserve currencies gain power. Countries that borrow in foreign currencies lose power. The US issues the dollar, Europe issues the euro, Japan issues the yen. These nations control the engine, most others are controlled by it. Pattern 3, inflation is not an accident, it's a byproduct. Inflation protects governments from being crushed by their own debt. A $1 trillion debt becomes easier to pay when inflation erodes it. Inflation is debt relief for governments, not for you. Pattern 4, nations don't compete through production, they compete through leverage. The modern arms race isn't missiles, it's monetary firepower. Japan prints endlessly. Europe manipulates bond markets. China expands credit through state banks. America uses the dollar and treasury markets as geopolitical weapons. We're watching a global chess match played with debt, not soldiers, and the engine sits at the center of it all, humming quietly. Here's the truth you were never meant to see. Power no longer belongs to nations with the most money, but to nations with the most control over the creation of debt. Real influence today is held by central banks, global bond markets, institutional investors, shadow banking networks, sovereign wealth funds. These entities decide how much governments can borrow, how cheap or expensive that borrowing is, which nations rise, which nations fall, which currencies survive, which financial systems implode. This isn't a conspiracy. This is the architecture of modern economics, an architecture built not on gold, land, or labor, but on the hidden debt engine powering the entire global system. Takeaway number 1, debt is not a flaw, it's the foundation. The system isn't broken. It was designed to run on perpetual borrowing. Stopping debt growth would collapse the global economy instantly. Takeaway number 2. Crises strengthen the engine. Every crash, panic, recession, and emergency leads to only one response: more credit creation. The engine grows by feeding on instability. Takeaway number 3. Power follows control over debt issuance. The true world power isn't the biggest military or the biggest GDP. It's the entity with the authority to create money from nothing and charge interest on it. That is the center of modern power. We now live in a world where debt grows exponentially, while real productivity grows slowly. A world where money no longer measures value, it measures obligation. And at some point, a system built on infinite expansion meets the limits of the real world. The engine can run hotter, it can run faster, but it cannot run forever. The only question left is, what happens when the hidden engine finally consumes more than the world can give? If you want more deep dives that expose the financial architecture shaping your life, make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this video with someone who still thinks money works the way it did 50 years ago, because the more people understand the engine, the harder it becomes for it to control the future.